Welcome back. This is Denise Peterson-Rafuse at the Cove. I have here today Ben Davis, who's the president of the MS Society of Canada, the Atlantic Division. And we were just talking about people with MS and employers and the workplace to make people know that if you have somebody at your workplace with a disability, whether it's MS or not, that people are extraordinarily functional. A lot of times people with disabilities tend to work even extra harder because they know that there can be a different attitude towards them having a disability, and so they go that extra mileage to make sure that their work is done well and that they are really functional at the workplace, but they do need a little bit of support. And so we're going to talk to Ben about that in terms of MS and what kind of supports and attitudes that we need from the employer and colleagues to make sure that those who have MS can do what they want to do, and that is work.
Absolutely. That is work. Make work work. When we think about Atlantic Canada and we think about retention, and then you also think about, the cost associated with high turnover and things like that. If you happen to have someone in your office who's living with MS or another episodic illness or has some level of disability, I think it's important that employers think, how can I accommodate this person, right? What's the culture we have here that can do that?
And we said that 87% of Canadians at some time in their life are going to have a disability, and we do have an older society, so our workforce is also
Absolutely.
an aging workforce, so we better keep that in mind in terms of the support that is needed to keep our workforce going.
Yeah, and we caught a stat recently. I think it's over 2.3 million working age Canadians live with a disability across the country. Think about that. That's a significant number. We've had some work done in partnership with the Conference Board of Canada, for example, where they did a wonderful report on MS in the workplace. And certainly accommodation is one of their recommendations. Good communication as well in terms of both the person living with the disability and being able to feel comfortable bringing that forward. It's a safe, because some people certainly have hesitation. What's the employer going to think? If I have to ask for time off, or how flexible can I be? So employers.
And that's part of the accommodation that you're talking about.
Exactly. That's the being flexible. Working from home if that's appropriate, or if it's not, what are the shifts? What are the accommodations? What's the built environment like? There's all sorts of things to consider that are not as costly as people think. And when you trade off the costs of doing these accommodations versus retention and retraining and searching for employers, etc., it's a good return on investment. And so from our perspective, we strongly encourage, especially during the month of May, during MS Awareness Month, that is considered by your listeners, anyone who is out there who wants to improve their work environment.
And it would really be really nice if employers would even consider that as part of their policy. We've talked a lot about accessibility, which is really important for people with disabilities, but then there's that kind of silent accessibility, and that's having that support from the employer, because you may have a MS worker who is going through a little episodic period that they cannot work the full hours altogether, but if they have a little bit of rest, they're back at it again. Like you said, working from home, and we have 24 hours in the day, so there's a lot of time to make up for any of that type of work or work from home. Many people work from home nowadays, right?
Exactly, yeah. Just trying to be aware and flexible in terms of how an employer can support people who are living with various levels of disability. And from an access perspective, in our view, the accessibility legislation federally as well as provincially, it's nonpartisan. It's good.
It's good. That's what we want to see.
It's good.
We need to
right?
move forward.
Move forward. And from our view, in the definition of disability, to include episodic illness, that was our clear recommendation, and we're happy to see that that's being considered. And in fact, it is here in Nova Scotia. It is it's legislated.
Part of the legislation,
yeah,
because people with disabilities and organizations like yourself came forward.
Definitely.
And very strongly voiced your opinion
Yes.
that these issues needed to be part of that legislation, and it's great that it is.
Yeah,
That's what like I said, that's what we want.
Yeah, progress, But when you think about if they're in the unfortunate scenario where people are unable to work because of their MS, We also advocate for more income supports for people who are living off of disability. So for example, with appreciating these are more of our approach federally, but the disability tax credit. Many people utilize that disability tax credit, but
That's right,
there's also
yes.
lots of people who don't because it's a tax credit, and if you're not earning income, really a credit is not that useful.
So there's a
to you.
gap in the system.
There's a gap in the system, and our view is that, and I know it's complex, but we feel that the tax credit should actually be refundable so that income can be delivered directly to those who need it. It can really lift them out of a very difficult situation.
So part of your job with the MS Society is probably lobbying to
Absolutely.
whether provincial and federal governments and being very up to date and knowledgeable of what legislation is there or not there.
Correct.
And so that must be quite challenging because you're trying to move along a very slow system.
Yes, your question is timely. We as the MS Society were in Ottawa just last week. About 25
yes.
people, volunteers and staff working together, and we had over 80 meetings with various MPs
80 meetings.
and those in the civil service advocating for our issues. And I won't take up much time. I can be quite succinct on what we advocate for.
Yes.
It's income and employment support. And we talked about employment in terms of accommodation and flexible work environments, but also on the income support side, in addition to the disability tax credit being refundable, in our view, it should be. Also, when you think about EI sickness benefits,
Yes.
it's MS, as you know, especially if it's episodic, there's not a binary
Can't
switch.
plan for it.
You can't plan for it, and the way the sickness benefits work, you're all in. You have to take all 15 weeks at once. Whereas if the illness is episodic, maybe you need 4 weeks here or a few weeks here. And I know and we've had great dialogue with the folks at EI and CPPD, and they're aware of where we stand on this, and they're open for further discussions. It's the long game.
Do you think you made any inroads? Because
Absolutely.
That's just
Absolutely.
great.
No, we feel great, and we do it every year. And I would say there's been some small wins along the way, right? So, for example, minimizing the wait time to access benefits has been reduced from 2 weeks to 1. We want it to be 0, but it went down 50%. That's good news. Consideration on reducing clawbacks and things like that are all part of it. And really, it leads up to this broader discussion for another show, I'm sure.
Yes.
around
right.
basic income.
Yes.
And
yes.
just how looking at all the programs federally. The other bucket, so income and employment support, the other bucket is accelerating research. So we advocate for, the federal government and others to continue to support research. There's been some good examples with Brain Canada, where we've partnered with them on an MS progression cohort, which I'd be happy to talk about. So just the constantly advocating and demonstrating the positive outcomes of research, because as you go along the path of research, on a path to find the cause and the cure, but along the way you develop new quality of life treatments and benefits that, so it's always a win-win, if you will, when you invest in research. And the last key focus area for us from an advocacy perspective is access. And we talked about accessibility legislation, but also access to other treatments. The stem cell treatments, for example, is not accessible, if you will, across the country. It's only in certain places. And also access to home care.
Yes. And there is an inconsistency. And if you live in Canada, it shouldn't matter what province you live in terms of what support you receive. And somebody living in another province may receive less supports, right? Or more supports. That just does not make sense, does it?
It does not make sense. People hopping from one province to another or territory to get the support that they need, it doesn't make sense.
And what can we do better here provincially? When you're advocating to provincial governments or going in and talking to opposition parties, what do you advocate on a provincial level?
Yeah, we find that our advocacy focus areas both flow federally and provincially. So
they're all intertwined.
They're intertwined. Some of the purse strings, if you will, are federal and some are provincial, right? So for example, home care, in particular long-term care facilities, is it age appropriate? If you have progressive MS, there are stories in this province of people in their 30s and 40s who are in obviously a very difficult situation, but they're living in long-term care facilities that it's not age appropriate.
So they need community options.
They need
something
different
that's
options,
really important, and that the supports come with that community options, so that they have the right to. And that's for anybody with a disability to have a right to live in their own community if that's what they want. And most people do. They want to live where their families are, but they want that independence too.
Yeah, no question. So when we think about the federal transfers relative to the healthcare program, from our perspective, where is that money going? Is home care a priority? We think it should be. What about ensuring that all Health Canada approved disease-modifying therapies are available on the formulary? Those are things that we talk about provincially, and we're happy that there's discussions happening, and people are engaging. The accessibility legislation was another good example provincially where we had an opportunity to speak and
to educate. That's the key.
Yeah.
The education, like the leadership to make the proper decisions, they have to be educated. And of course, as you know, that there's many different groups and organizations trying to get their message across. So it can be very challenging, but you want everybody to be able to get their message across to support people no matter what their disabilities are. I know that another huge aspect for the MS Society is your fundraising and how important that is and how challenging that is, because there's so many different organizations that are very good organizations too that are out there trying to fundraise and get that dollar that they need to be able to improve their services. So tell us a little bit about what the MS Society focuses on in terms of fundraising.
Yeah, thank you. You're absolutely correct. The charitable sector, in particular in Nova Scotia, is made up of just wonderful, caring people, all working so hard. And Nova Scotia is such a generous province.
Oh, it is.
We should be very proud of that.
I think we're at the top in Canada when you look at the statistics about giving.
Absolutely, way up high. Yeah, absolutely. And so from our perspective, we are a charity, and so as a charity, we are required to we have to fundraise, and so we do it in a number of different areas. May is MS Awareness Month, so for example, in the month of May, we have our walk coming up on May 28th, and that is a very important fundraiser for us, where we have 13 locations across Atlantic Canada, where it's free to register, but we hope that people are pledging one another to go, and it's a significant fundraiser.
So people can find more about that, Ben, online?
On our website,
So if you want to Google the MS Society, so people can get to your website and see where a walk is and support that walk, whether it's in your community or not.
Correct. Yeah. So it's all available online, but people can also call our office. And I'll leave the number near the end of the call or our show today. But
that'd be great.
There's all. We're easily found.
Good.
Good. And I must say, registering for our events is really simple, and they're great. They're fun events where people come out, and it's an opportunity to learn and share and be with one another and join the fight.
So you have the walk, and
so we have the
May
walk,
28th.
May 28th, and then we have a series of 3 bike events that we do annually, one in Nova Scotia, one in New Brunswick, and one in Newfoundland. And those are also tremendous opportunities where people register, they bike. It's not a race. It's a fun opportunity. There's a challenge route, so if people want to bike a little farther, there's opportunities there. It's just a wonderful, fun team environment, and that's also a significant fundraiser for us.
Can I take electric bike?
Yeah.
I just discovered recently, right in the constituency, we have a young gentleman who's making electric bikes, and he's making them here right in Nova Scotia. So
that's awesome.
That might be the one that
I'll
hop on.
Yeah, come on out. Yeah, that's great. And then we also fundraise through a variety of other means. We are selling carnations in the month of May.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so that's.
And where can you find those carnations?
So if you call our office,
yes.
There's a number of different locations. Micmac Mall, I think this coming weekend actually. That will work for the timing of this. Is selling them at a location there.
And I'll remind my husband to get me a bouquet of carnations.
Thank you. Yeah. That's wonderful. And then we also apply for grants and foundations. We have the support of generous donors, who want to give to our campaign or support research or there's lots of different ways. And also people frankly consider us in their wills and estates, and that's to think of how important that is for someone to make that consideration to do that.
Their last
it really does make a difference. It really does make a difference. Another way I talk about our fundraising, and I don't say this as a criticism, but we're not government. We don't receive government funding.
And that's amazing, because that has to be very difficult to operate an office and to have staff and not be government funded in any way. I mean, that's
absolutely.
And every year, and that and it's the difficulty too is you're not going to know from one year to the next what you may be able to raise.
Exactly. So we work with volunteers. We're nothing without our volunteers. And we
know that. That's incredible, is our volunteer base. Yeah. And in Nova Scotia, it's like the giving. We're very high on the list for volunteering.
People give their time, their talent, and their treasure. And it means so much to a charity like ours. But we're also always trying to diversify our revenue and find new ways to raise money. One way, we have something called I Challenge MS, where we give people the tools, the website, access to everything they need to go do their own fundraising on our behalf. That could be a wedding, it could be a smash-up derby.
That's a brilliant idea.
But meet them where they're at. Give them the tools they need, and and tax receipts are issued. Like, it's very easy.
Oh,
seamless.
Ben, that is absolutely brilliant. Can you give us your telephone number?
A few different things I'll leave with you. So,
okay.
mssociety.ca is our website, and there
That's
you
easy.
can
mssociety.ca.
just link off there. But we also have something that's called the Knowledge Network. And the Knowledge Network is a relatively new initiative of ours where we have navigators across the country, including Atlantic, where someone can call, and I'll leave the phone number, 1-844-859-6789, and they can get help with whatever they need relative to the MS. So navigating the system, if you will, with new diagnosis, information, resources, community resource in particular.
That's really important.
Because, you've been through this,
It's
it can be
have
very
that
daunting.
information.
It's very daunting.
It's scary.
Yes. So you can also email us at msnavigators@mssociety.ca to help get that information. And our phone number, of course, is 1-902-468-8230. That's another way to get a hold of.
Ben Davis, the president of the MS Society of Canada Atlantic Division, I would like to say thank you so much for being here, and I know that we'll have you back again because there is so much more to learn about MS and to be able to be updated on what the society is doing. And I want the listeners to know that it's very important for us to support anybody with a disability. We're all human beings. We all want to work. We all want to play. We all want to be part of a family and a part of our community. And so remember that, I often say people with disability are people with ability because many of them beyond me are quite amazing in what they're able to do. So I call them people with ability.
Agreed. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's wonderful to have the MS Society here. This is Denise Peterson-Rafuse at the Cove, and thank you for listening this evening.